Gender stereotypes support the common assumption that there are massive differences between men and women. These stereotypes include: females are tender, males are tough, males are competitive, females are cooperative, females are submissive, males are dominant, females are emotional, males are stoic, females are more talkative than males. Females are verbal while males are mathematical or calculating, among others. According to Hyde, some of the unfounded differences. Popular beliefs include girls are more social, suggestible, have lower self-esteem, better at rote learning and completing simple tasks, have lower cognitive processing, and lack achievement motivation. The phrase "men are from Mars and women are from Venus" is used to explain gender differences in behavioral tendencies, attitudes, interests, abilities, and personalities. Zell and colleagues observed that the assumption of large differences between the sexes is unsurprising since gender, race, and age are the most salient categories of social perceptions. This phenomenon is based on the obvious physical or biological differences between the sexes that affect different aspects of gender. Individuals are also constantly exposed to gender roles and stereotypes, with this constant exposure affecting individual perceptions of the sexes. The gender similarities hypothesis suggests that men and women are similar in most but not all psychological variables. In other words, men and women are more similar than they are different. Zell and colleagues, in estimating gender differences, suggest that the cross-domain differences between the sexes remain unresolved. Prominent stereotypes revolve around gender differences in specific domains such as leadership, mathematical, and verbal abilities. Hyde explains that some motor behaviors and aspects of sexuality present large sex differences, moderate differences in aggression, and minimal differences in other domains. Most of the examined domains include memory, social behavior, personality, and abilities. Motor performance components such throwing velocity and distance present greater differences during adolescence as muscle mass and bone density increase. Gender differences are also significant in masturbation, attitudes on casual sex, and uncommitted relationships. However, men and women report close to zero differences in satisfaction. The differences in aggression are greater than variations in verbal aggression. Girls score higher in relational aggression when the measurement approaches direct observation. The male and female self-esteem gaps overlap, exhibiting more similarities than differences. The magnitude of the gender differences in self-esteem do grow as individuals approach adolescence, but the differences are minimal, with boys reporting higher levels of self-esteem. Hyde's study found that the males and females distributions overlapped by at least 75%, thereby indicating that the statistical distribution of the sexes is not significant. The author maintains that most psychological gender differences are in the minimal range and very few in the large range. The most established gender differences are noted in aggression, mathematical abilities, visual spatial abilities, and verbal abilities. Noteworthy, it is largely believed that sex differences in mathematical performance were insignificant in childhood, with the difference becoming significant after puberty. Similarly, there is the belief that men excelled in high-level mathematical problems that are characterized by intricate processing requirements, while women excelled in low-level problems that would otherwise be categorized as simple. Hyde observes that the gender differences in elementary mathematics are minimal in favor of girls, and the differences do not exist in high school. Solving complex mathematical problems does not exhibit notable differences in elementary school, but minimal differences emerge in high school in favor of boys. Hyde's publication of 2014 replicates most of findings in the earlier publication, including gender differences in mathematical abilities being trivial at best. However, examining age and cognitive level of the test, that is, computation, comprehending math problems and problem-solving complexity, reveals substantial gender differences favoring males, especially in high school. Complex problem-solving skills are fundamental in STEM, and as such, could explain the gender composition of the related fields. Notable differences do exist when it comes to gender differences in computer self-efficacy. The fluctuating gender differences, especially with age, challenges the assumption that these differences are large and stable. Context is an important consideration when examining gender differences. According to Hyde, some occupations such as engineering and architecture, where women are underrepresented, require mental rotation skills, which are more in favor of males, with some skills appearing as early as infancy. Some colleges offer mental rotation training to women to increase their participation in STEM fields. Hyde associates differences in mathematical and spatial performance with timing, in that, tightly timed tests that examine speed and skills favor men greatly, whereas untimed tests allow females to display their skills, thereby reducing the magnitude of the gender differences. Gender differences are larger in math anxiety and math self-confidence as opposed to actual mathematical performance. Gender differences favoring female verbal skills are small, with there being no differences in vocabulary, reading comprehension, or essay writing. The greatest differences in verbal skills pertain to verbal fluency. In terms of personalities and social behaviors, girls score higher in attention and inhibitory control, even though the differences are small to moderate. Women are more sensitive to punishment, but the sexes are similar in reward sensitivity. There are trivial gender differences for positive emotions, internalizing emotions such as anxiety and sadness, and externalizing emotions such as anger. The differences in positive emotions increase with age, a phenomenon commonly associated with the social acceptance of women being emotional. As often stereotyped, men are more interested in things while women are interested in people. Gender differences in aggression are minimal and depend on what is measured, with men being physically aggressive and women being aggressive in verbal and relational contexts. Gender differences favoring female communication are minimal. Men are more helping in dangerous situations, exhibiting the heroism aspect of the male role, while women would be more likely to help children. Hyde observes that gender differences are small in certain sexual behaviors, including casual sex, extramarital sex, and number of partners, and sexual attitudes, including those on extramarital affairs and homosexuality. Moderate differences favoring males exist in masturbation, pornography consumption, casual sex, and number of sexual partners. However, these differences could be a reflection of the social acceptance of men as being sexually active and women as being passive. Gender similarities exist in oral sex and condom use. Gender differences do not exist in leadership effectiveness when using subjective or objective measures, but male leaders excel in male roles while female leaders excel in feminine ones. In terms of psychopathology and well-being, women are twice as likely as men to be depressed, but these differences set in during adolescence. Women also report higher levels of rumination or constantly having and focusing on dark thoughts. Contrary to media reports, gender differences in self-esteem exist but are very small. The differences increase in adolescence but even out in college. Del Giudice and colleagues' study of 2012 revealed that the realm of Cattelian personality space contains a 10% overlap between men's and women's personalities. The authors argue that these effect sizes firmly place personality in the same category of other psychological constructs showing large, robust sex differences, such as aggression and vocational interests in the people-thing domain. Del Giudice and colleagues maintain that most of the reported differences between men and women are founded on the sexual selection and parental investment theories, which suggest that observable differences between the sexes are largest in traits surrounding mating and parenting. In other words, the sexes exhibit differences in domains where they experience significant variations in adaptive problems. For instance, mate selection processes present great gender differences, while extroversion presents more similarities than differences. Conroy Beam and colleagues found that men's and women's mate selections overlap 23% of the time. The biological nature of sex differences in mate selection is evidenced by the fact that this selection is consistent across various cultures. Most personality traits affect parenting and sexual behavior, including promiscuity and divorce. Promiscuity is predicted by dark triad traits, such as Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism, positive schizotypy, neuroticism in women, openness to experience and extroversion. Altruism, honesty, humility, conscientiousness, and agreeableness are negative predictors of promiscuity in both men and women. Divorce is predicted by low agreeableness, low conscientiousness, and neuroticism, which could explain why women are more likely to file for divorce. Apart from mating, personality traits also affect other sexually selected behaviors, including risk-taking and status-seeking. Hyde's publication of 2014 reports on gender similarities theories by focusing on components left out of research. For instance, the author argues that evolutionary theories, in explaining gender differences, focus on sexual selection while ignoring the fact that natural selection affects both men and women equally, and as such, Selection in the context of evolution should result in similarities as opposed to differences. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, with only one pair containing sex chromosomes that differentiate men and women and the other 22 being passed from mothers to sons and fathers to daughters. The cognitive social learning theory suggests that behavior is shaped by punishments and rewards or reinforcements. As children grow, behavioral adaptations shift from external to internal reinforcements through self-efficacy and self-regulation. The continuous decline of punishments for gender role violations could be used to explain why boys and girls are likely to act in similar fashion. This phenomenon also explains the increased enrollment of men into humanities and women into STEM. The social role theory focuses on the gendered division of labor and the allocation of social roles resulting in gender differences. The theory suggests that as men become more involved in families, that they would adopt nurturing capabilities, which are commonly reported in women. Zell and colleagues argue that the magnitude of gender differences fluctuate as a function of the psychological domain, including well-being, personality and social variables, and cognitive variables, but remain constant across different generations, cultures, and age. The authors maintain that behavioral scientists and researchers have constantly conducted meta-analyses in examining the overall or average sex differences in specific domains. These domains include personality, aggression, and self-esteem. Focusing on domain-specific differences tend to overinflate the differences between men and women. Zell and colleagues argue that aggregating meta-analytic findings reveals minimal differences between the sexes. Notably, 48% of meta-analytic effects reveal small sex differences, while 30% of the effects reveal that the differences are very small or close to zero. Overall, 78% of reported gender differences are close to zero. Del Giudice and colleagues argue that gender differences become smaller when using observable data as compared to data analytical methods. Hyde suggests that using the de-individuation technique, the state in which people lose their individual identity, uncovers gender similarities in aggression because the sexes are not socialized differently. In other words, the minimization or removal of gender norms eliminate gender differences in aggression. The stereotype threat of cognitive domain, which revolves around the assumption that African Americans are intellectually inferior, was applied to girls and women in the context of math. Experiments where participants were told that the test presented gender differences revealed gender differences, with the vice versa being true for instances where participants were told there were no differences. These types of tests focus on supporting the social role theory, which suggests that differences between men and women arise from socialization variances and societal expectations. Hyde suggests that in accordance with the social role theory, the magnitude of gender differences is largest in instances of danger, with the genders comfortably reverting to their social roles, that is, men being heroic and women being nurturers. Gender differences are also larger when individuals realize they are being noticed, with women tending to smile more than men. Hyde argues that overinflating gender differences presents serious costs in the workplace, education, and in relationships. For instance, the overpresentation of women as nurturers in a way presents men as incapable of being nurturing even in their parenting roles, thereby almost always losing custody of their children in family court except for instances where the mother is mentally unstable, among other exceptions. Hyde observes that women who violate the nurturing norm, thereby becoming agentic, have lower hireability ratings, especially for managerial positions. Women are required to present themselves as agentic and competent to be hired, but this combination also risks the possibility of being perceived as uncaring and deficient in interpersonal terms. Besides, female leaders who are presented as autocrats get more negative evaluations compared to men due to the violation of the nurturing social norm. Girls who perform well at math may be overlooked by parents and teachers because boys are the ones expected to perform better, a phenomenon that adversely affects self-confidence and performance. Constantly reminding men and women that they are incapable of communicating because of their personality differences really ruins relationships. According to Hyde, self-esteem is much of a problem for boys as it is for girls during adolescence years, and the constant focus on girls leads to overlooking boys. Thus, the gender similarities hypothesis is fundamental in improving practice across various professions and fields, including psychology, education, and management.